Hi everyone, this is My Mind on Drugs, and I kind of just wanted to talk to you today about some things that you may find that you're doing wrong, like just common mistakes that people have when trying to find their voice, and kind of how you can diagnose some of these problems that you might be having, because when you have more than one thing going wrong and you don't know how to correct it, or what's actually causing the problem, you could overcorrect somewhere else, and then now you're tensing something you shouldn't be, and now your voice is different, but now it's just weird different. And it's not where you're going to want it, and it's kind of like this weird little rabbit's trail that you're probably going around back and forth, like, is this it? Is this it? I don't know. Like, so I'm going to try to give you some tips and some tools that you can use to really kind of figure out what's going wrong with your voice or what's going right. So that way you can kind of just play with it yourself until you can detect that, hey, I'm doing this right, this feels right, you know, these tests that I'm running are, you know, I'm looking good. So so to start out with, I want to talk about finding your head voice. And I go into another video where I talk about head voice versus falsetto. And many of you might know that falsetto is not where you're going to want to be when you're talking, because it's going to give you a very airy voice, and it's going to have like a really kind of washed out sound to it, and you're not going to like it. But if you're in head voice, it's going to be clearer. And again, I go in another video, I talk about how the vocal cords in falsetto actually have a little space between them. So when they vibrate, that air is just rushing through, and that's what's giving you that really ha kind of noise. Now, when you're trying to use your head voice, it's really important to focus on how you're breathing, because if you're breathing from the chest, you're going to find that what happens is those muscles that you use to contract your chest, like expel the air out, actually seems to have an effect on your throat. I know for me, it seems like it kind of opens it a little bit when I tense my chest area to like constrict that cavity, and that really makes it hard to keep my vocal cords mashed together, and it kind of seems like it causes them to split a little bit, and that makes me slip into falsetto. So the first thing you can do is put one hand on your chest, put one on your stomach, and go to talk. And notice when you breathe in your chest, or I'm sorry, breathe in to talk, what's moving? Is it your chest that's rising? Are your shoulders rising? Is your stomach pooching out? Is it both? Because what you should be feeling is that your chest is still and your stomach is what's growing and shrinking. So this means when your stomach grows and shrinks, it means you're using your diaphragm to actually expel the air. And this is good, because this is how you want to be able to breathe, so that you can make sure that you want to breathe, because that's how you can get into your head voice, is again through your diaphragm breathing. And if you're rising your chest, that means you're using chest voice, and you're going to constrict, and it's going to cause you to go into falsetto. Now, if you have your hands on your chest and one on your stomach, and you're still finding that you're getting that ha sound still, or if you find that when you go for your high notes, you're still getting that ha sound still, but your chest isn't moving, go to speak and then notice, or try to hit that high note, and then notice if you feel like a tension around your sternum area. Now, your chest might not be moving, but you could kind of feel like a tension. Again, it will not be in the throat. It'll kind of feel like just under your collarbones. And again, like right in that middle of the sternum. So that means you're actually like kind of constricting it. Now, you haven't expanded your chest, but you're still constricting. So you're still using those muscles that are going to open up that throat and cause you to go into falsetto. And when you do that, again, you might sound better, but because of the way you're tensing your chest, it's going to cause you to easily slip out of head voice and like kind of marry it into a weird falsetto voice. And so if you were to, for instance, take in a deep breath, like you're just a big breath, and then push it out, and then once you're done pushing out all the air, try to push out more air. So again, just breathe in, and then breathe out. and then keep breathing out. Till you kind of get like a little bit of a wheeze. Now, notice how your chest feels when you wheeze. And then notice the quality of of that air coming out when you wheeze. And notice how that kind of sounds similar to falsetto. That's because what you're doing at the end of your breath, like that first breathe out, sounds really nice. But then as you get to the end and force that breath, that last breath is very airy, very wheezy. Because what you just did is like at the end, like when you breathed out the first time, that was you using your diaphragm. But then when you went for the extra push, what you did was you constricted your chest muscles to try to squeeze your lungs just a little bit more to try to get that little air out. And when you do that, again, it's going to jack with your throat and the positioning of it, and it's going to make it really, really hard to stay in head voice. And you're probably going to find that you're going into falsetto. And again, when you're hitting those high notes, I know there's a really bad habit of trying to force more air out to get a higher kind of pitch. But really, you don't need a higher pitch to go higher. Like, you don't need to be loud. All forcing more air out does is really make you louder. I know I have a tendency to do that. I know it's a real bad habit I have. But again, if you find that you feel that tension and your stomach, you feel like your stomach breathing fine, you're probably still constricting that chest, which is still causing you to go into a falsetto, which is not what you're going to want. Another thing is on your larynx, because for me, this is the second most important thing about having a feminine voice, is if you were to find your Adam's apple and then kind of put your index finger over it, just over the top of it, kind of like you're making a I'm gonna slit my throat kind of gesture, and just rest it there. And then go to speak and notice if your Adam's apple rises over your finger and kind of like clicks it on the way up, and then you can kind of feel that it disappears. That means you're holding up, your larynx, and you're constricting it, and that's going to give you a more feminine voice. But again, if you find that you can still kind of feel, I mean, granted, I have a relatively smaller Adam's apple, but when I'm lifting my larynx, I cannot feel it at all. So if you find that that's dropping, that could be one of your problems. And I know sometimes, especially starting out, keeping that larynx up can be you can get worn out over time. So it's really easy to confuse kind of the sound of your larynx with the sound of falsetto, because they're both going to kind of make your voice a little fuzzier, where falsetto is just going to sound more unclear, like more airy. But with your larynx down, it's going to sound a little fuzzier. So I'm going to try. Hey, 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 sorry. Hey, hey, versus hey, 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 versus hey, hey, hey. Now you can hear that when I do the larynx, it doesn't sound quite as airy as hey, 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 hey. See, that's falsetto versus hey, 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 hey. So you can hear that when I drop the larynx, it still sounds like a ha, but it doesn't sound ha. It sounds more like ha, not ha, ha, versus ha, ha, ha. So again, that's when I drop my Adam's apple. Ha, ha. And I'm going to raise it up now. Ha, ha. So that's the difference in raising your larynx. And again, compare, if you can, again, compare the difference between hearing how the difference in the larynx sounds versus falsetto, then you should be able to distinguish which one's wrong. And if not, you can always do a quick check on your larynx to make sure that that's not the problem. And then if it isn't the problem, again, check your breathing, put your hand on your chest, put one on your stomach, make sure you're breathing in properly. And if that's still not the problem, and you're still kind of getting that ha sound, or ha sound, then you might want to make sure you're not tensing your chest when you're breathing out or going for the high notes, because that's essentially trying to breathe with your chest, and it's going to force the muscles that to kind of expand in your throat, and you're not going to you're going to go slip into falsetto. It's going to be really hard to like stay in head voice. So the third thing is going to be on your resonance. So when we talk about resonance, we're talking about what's actually vibrating inside your body. And one of the things, so it's either your chest muscles, it's either going to be your nasal cavity, or it's going to be like somewhere in your throat / chest. And to kind of figure out where you're resonating, like I said, a good check is to simply just put one hand on your chest, one hand on your nose bridge, and then just speak. And if you find that you're not feeling anything in your chest and everything in your nose, any vibrations in your nose, then that means you're speaking in your nasal cavity, which for me is my preferred way to resonate. And that's how I'm speaking right now. I was speaking earlier in my throat, and when you do speak in your throat, what you're going to feel is that you're going to feel a small little reverberation in the chest, but it's a lot, and you're going to feel it also in your nasal cavity. So that means you're speaking from your throat. So if I'm speaking from my throat, I'm going to have a bit of a richer kind of, a richer kind of sound like I'm doing now versus a richer kind of sound like I'm doing now or a nasal cavity like I'm doing now, I'm sorry. And then when you're speaking from your chest, it's going to be all in the chestal cavity. You're going to feel it, and you're going to feel nothing, absolutely nothing in your nasal cavity. I don't like to do this at all. I still find it hard to do. But if you find that your nasal cavity is not vibrating at all, that means you are speaking, or you are speaking inside your chest. And that's going to get you a really kind of low sounding timbre in your voice. And while that's perfectly okay, and it can still sound feminine, I know a lot of people that's not their preferred method. So you can make sure that's going on. Let's see. So again, if you find that you have an airy voice, make sure you're not in falsetto. Hand on chest, hand on stomach, no tension in the chest. When you breathe out, again, check your resonance. You can check your nasal cavity and your stomach to see where you're coming from. And you can kind of play around to figure out where you're going to hit your resonance and how you want to do that. That's really more up to personal preference. Because you can even, like, a lot of times, like, I'll be talking here, and then when I get really excited, I go up into my nasal cavity. You can really play around with that. There's a lot of leeway in resonance. But again, if you don't really know how to vibrate that, you can't really play around with it, and it might just sound off. You might still sound really low in your pitch, even though you're just breathing from your chest. So make sure you're not doing that either. And then again, the final one is your larynx. Again, try to slit your throat. Feel for that rise in the Adam's apple, and then make sure that it stays hidden. Because I know starting out with me, you can hold it for a little bit, and then, but I would really like to try to tense it. But it's kind of like when you get like a really strong grip with your hand, and you just squeeze it as hard as you can, and then you try to squeeze it again. It's not as tight, and eventually you just lose all your grip. That's kind of the same thing with your larynx. You really need to again, work that, and that's going to come over time, again, along with your pitch. And again, for pitch, there's really not much you can do except do some vocal practices. Again, for me, the sliding practice that I mentioned in some of my examples of like some basic training practices video, that's what's going to really help you push your pitch, because you're going to want to start out around A3, and then try to go up to E4. If you can stay within this range, you're going to be pretty well off. You can see that I've kind of been talking in A3 a lot more in this video, and it still sounds pretty good. You don't have to have a high pitch to, sound super feminine. And it'll also help if when you're trying to practice everything but your pitch, when you're trying to practice how the quality of the sound of your voice, it's probably best to not really push for the higher notes, because you're going to get into some bad habits where, I know I have a bad habit of, again, tensioning my chest cavity even when I'm trying to stomach breathe, and that'll shoot me into alto sometimes when I don't want to. But yeah, so again, if you're still having trouble with your voice, try some of these checks. Try to see what's going wrong. If you're finding that you're getting the wrong feeling, just kind of play around, and then really just, again, once you get that, you can tell if you're doing it right, move on to the next thing, and then check that thing, make sure you're doing that right, then move next thing, and then eventually you'll get to the point where you're like, oh, it's my larynx, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, and hopefully that'll help you find your voice. Again, you might not be able to keep it an entire time because of your larynx, but if you can find it, then you'll be able to reproduce it, because just note that feeling of how everything's tensing together, how everything's relaxing together, and then just kind of memorize that, and eventually, if the more you find your voice over and over again, eventually you'll get it, and you'll be able to boom, I got it, I stick it, and you'll habituate it, and it'll be great. So again, thank you everyone for listening, and have a good day. Good luck. Bye.